Hey Dee, how do you keep track of everything in your garden? Do you have a diary or a journal, a calendar? One of our listeners would like to know.
I keep reminders on my iPhone to order things like amaryllis, spring blooming bulbs, and then I take pictures of areas where I want to plant, especially with certain things like spring blooming bulbs, right? And then I also insert that into my notes program with a little note. And then there's my blog. I never thought about it, but my blog is kind of a diary.
Yeah, my blog is kind of a diary too because I have that Garden Bloggers Bloom Day and the 15th of the month, and I've been doing it since 2007. So that's higher math, but I think it's about 15 years of records of what blooms every month in the garden.
Right.
Other than that, I've started using Trello for the big stuff. I do need to go back and check it and clean it up periodically. But after a while, don't you just know what's going on?
Yeah, I think we just sort of know. We can feel it in our bones.
Yeah. You said bones first for Halloween.
I did.
All right, let me get us started. Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana, where I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about 1/3 of an acre.
And I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma. And I garden on several acres out in the boondocks. Too many.
We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we want others to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Good morning, Carol. What did you do this week?
Dee, I got rain this week. Finally.
You did? That's exciting.
It is exciting. So, not terribly a lot, but enough. But I did clean up the figs, the frost pretty well, finished them off. So I've got those all cut back and cut into little pieces and threw those in the compost pile. And then I ordered seeds from Botanical Interest for next year, and they're shipping very fast. I ordered Friday, and they should be in my mailbox today, which is excellent. And then... Yes.
So about the figs, explain why you're able to just cut those back and it's no big deal, like unlike some other shrubs.
Well, because the figs are root hardy in my climate, and so I will cover the base with a big foot-high layer of leaves, and then it'll come back from the roots. So none of that growth on top is going to live in the winter. So that's why I went ahead and cut it all back.
Plus figs bloom on new wood, blooming fruit on new wood.
Oh, that's what you wanted me to say.
Yeah, that was what I wanted you to say. But it's also interesting that they're ground hardy. They're very hardy here, but keep going.
Yes. So something that's not hardy and has taken a couple of frosts but is still kind of doing pretty well was the African blue basil. So after last week's episode about soft stem cuttings, I thought, you know what? I can't find those online because I was looking for some links. I thought I got nothing to lose by taking some cuttings. So I did take some cuttings and we'll see how they do. And then I am growing a bunch of microgreens inside. So more on that
you're
later.
Busy.
Not that busy.
This is my favorite time of the year in the garden because all the stuff that you did comes to fruition, even if you have a bad year, a bad summer like we did, because you're starting to get, fall foliage and stuff. And I joke all the time that I garden on too many acres because I do. But I was up in the meadow and I had kind of an awakening because I was down in my garden gathering seeds, walking them up to the meadow and scattering them. And yeah, I could be more efficient about that, but I was trying to get steps in. So I was doing it that way too. And I just had this thought that nobody else would be taking care of the meadow the way I take care of it. So there's a reason that I'm still here. I care about butterflies and meadows and stuff like that. I also rehabbed all of my houseplants this weekend. I am a terrible houseplant person, and I refuse to say mother. They are not children for me. And good thing, because it'd be houseplant abuse.
Yeah, so we'd have to call the houseplant police on you.
Yeah, we would. And then people would take them away. Maybe that would be okay. Anyway, I got to give a shout out to philodendrons and pothos because they can just take the abuse. And after all, pothos is devil's ivy. and we're recording this on Halloween. So
That's right.
there you go. My jade plant is very unhappy. I don't know what's wrong with it. I may have to look up how to rehab a jade plant. There you go.
Or maybe one of our listeners has an idea for you.
Maybe so.
Well, that all sounds pretty good. I need to rehab my houseplants. As I always say, you got to make up with them again after the summer of neglect.
Yeah, mine have a few mealybugs, so I put them in the shower and put soapy water on them and then rinsed them all off really good and got underneath the leaves where those little critters like to be and took the pots off of the little saucers. And I mean, I really worked hard, but I'll still have trouble with them. I'll still have to spray them with neem or something. Anyway, keep going. Quote?
I will go to the quote. There is something incredibly nostalgic and significant about the annual cascade of autumn leaves. Joe L. Wheeler.
So this week we're going to talk about colorful fall shrubs.
That's right. After you sent me that email from, I think it was Southern Living with some of their colorful fall shrubs. Say that 3 times real fast. I said that would make a great topic. And by the way, none of the shrubs on their list would grow in my garden. Right. I wasn't familiar with them. So we'll go back and forth. We'll ping pong this.
Okay. So I went through my garden too to see what I had. And I'm just going to start with one that gets a bad rap because it's ligustrum. But ligustrum sunshine, that doesn't sound right. Ligustrum something sunshine. Anyway, the sunshine ligustrum. It is supposed to be seed-free. And I never ever see it bloom even. So there's that. And it's bright yellow in the sun all summer, but then it turns a golden yellow in the fall. It's a nice, colorful shrub to grow in full sun, which is not easy to find here.
Well, that sounds pretty nice. In my garden, the yellow fall color is coming from the vernal witch hazel, which is nice because for most of the year, it's either bare branches and tiny little flowers, which are kind of exciting at the end of February. And then it's just a big green blob. So when it has those beautiful yellow foliage, you think, okay, you're worth keeping around.
Mm-hmm. I love the witch hazels. I do. I think they're beautiful. So the next thing we talked about when we were discussing this the other day were viburnums. And I think some of the native viburnums are some of the best ones you can get, like arrowhead viburnum. My favorite is southern black haw. And there's several selected varieties in the southern black haw series, like Forest Rouge is one that I have that is not as much of a sucker plant as the original black haw. And those can be either shrubs or trees.
Yeah, and in my garden, I have some arrowwood viburnums, but they've already dropped their leaves, and I think it's because it got so dry. Mm-hmm. They've already dropped their leaves, but the non-native Korean spice and Judd viburnums in my garden still have their dark glossy foliage on them, and they'll be turning to some pretty nice fall colors probably in another week. And so that dark purple and reddish bronzy look, I like that.
Can I tell you something I learned about viburnums since I killed Korean spice twice?
What did you learn, Dee?
So let's see if I can get this out. So I was out buying some viburnums that had been cuttings, and I bought them from Bob Scott's nursery.
Right.
And Bob came out and he said, hey, one of them was, Mohawk. I bought Mohawk, and then I bought Cayuga. Okay. So this year I bought Mohawk, which I've also killed once before too. And he gave me the answer. He said, don't plant this yet. Leave it in the pot all summer. He goes, you remember when I bought my giant amount of, shrubs?
Right.
He goes, this one, don't go home and plant it yet. He goes, it needs a really good root ball before you transfer it into soil. It freaks out. And he said, these viburnums will die on you so easy. And he goes, and I figured that out after years and years of growing them. And so I did. I nursed that viburnum because I said, well, I bought a cayuga from you last year. And he said, did it live? I said, yeah, and I planted it in the fall. And he goes, I really think that's the key. So I nursed this one along all summer. I planted it over where we took down a pine tree. And you know what? It's doing splendidly.
Wonderful. So next on the list, you put what in your neck of the woods is a small tree, but we are going to allow it because we make up our own rules around here.
It's crepe myrtles. Right now, crepe myrtles in Oklahoma are going through a really hard time. It used to be the shrub that we didn't have to think about, or small tree, and now it has crepe myrtle scale almost everywhere. I don't have it here because I'm out in the country, but it's coming. Anyway, so I'm not saying plant them right now, but they do have beautiful fall color, especially the ones that are dark green.
And around here, crepe myrtle is a shrub that will die back to the ground usually because it's usually root hardy.
Right.
And people go gaga over black diamond, which has almost black foliage.
Right.
And pink flowers. And you said there's some more colors in that
series. There's a white one in that series, and there's also a red one. And they have very, very dark leaves, and they're quite popular here too. I don't think they're quite as tough as the green ones.
No, they are not. I don't think they are either. Now, I don't speak from any experience. I think I tried a crepe myrtle once, but I did get a black leafed clematis called Sirius Black.
Mm-hmm. Harry Potter.
And it didn't make it.
Yeah. Well, neither did Sirius Black in Harry Potter, but I digress. So, do we want to count roses?
Again, we own this podcast. We make up the rules. So I'm going to consult the little guidebook we have and say, yes, we can include roses.
Because roses do have beautiful yellow foliage before it falls off, but even more important, they have rose hips. And rose hips are very beautiful in the fall.
They are extremely beautiful in the fall if you let them form. And you should. You should.
Well, it toughens up the plant. And don't you grow rugosa type roses there?
I do not personally grow rugosa, but I remember from my college days that was one rose that one of the great features of it is A, it's a tough rose, mm-hmm. and B, it has great hips.
You know something else about rugosa roses that's interesting?
What's that?
They have those rough leaves, not like a regular shiny rose leaf, a rough leaf.
Yep.
So you cannot spray them because if you spray them, the leaves all fall off. And so you never ever, they don't need to be sprayed anyway because rugosas are tough. And you don't want to because if you accidentally overspray onto them, if you're a sprayer, I am not, it's too bad for your rugosa.
Yes. Now you're going to break our rules again, or maybe it's not our rule. So you're going to talk about Japanese maples, technically not a shrub, but a small tree.
And very colorful. I have several different ones that are green, and usually that is viridis, but also coral bark Japanese maple has green leaves. Those turn a lovely, lovely yellow in the fall. And some Japanese maples are really short and cascading, and so they look like shrubs. If you buy a red Japanese maple, it will not turn that much. It might turn a little orange, but it stays basically the same unless you ever fertilize it. If you give it too much nitrogen, it'll turn green. But anyway, I also have one called Peaches and Cream that is a variegated foliage, and it turns all different colors in the fall. It's really beautiful.
That sounds nice. So I'm gonna bring us back to shrubs with Fothergilla Major, which has outstanding fall. Yeah, it has outstanding fall foliage, and I had some in the front, and then I moved them to the side where nobody sees them but me, and occasionally a neighbor next door might walk by and see them. And I thought that is a shame because that is a knockout shrub. I mean, maybe, and it suckers pretty easily. So I thought maybe I'm going to try to dig that up and move that to where it can be seen by neighbors because it's pretty doggone pretty in the fall.
Yeah, I've dug it up twice because I've killed it twice. I apparently can't grow it, but that's not to say other people can't. For you, it suckers. That's why I laughed because I was like, mine doesn't sucker. And then you were going to talk about your oak leaf hydrangea, which I can't say enough about oak leaf hydrangeas.
Oh my gosh. So I have this oak leaf hydrangea, and I apologize to Proven Winners 6 Ways to Sunday. I got this thing in a quart pot years ago, and it is now a full-grown shrub, and it is gorgeous, and it has the most beautiful foliage. It's sort of that mahogany red colors. Mm-hmm. It is great. It's kind of hidden behind this evergreen on the corner, so once again, unless you know it's there and go back to look at it, nobody's seeing it but me. But it is beautiful.
Do you know which variety it was?
That's where my apology is because I don't know. But I will say most of the oak leaf, I've never met an oak leaf hydrangea I didn't like. So if you buy any name variety, you're probably going to be okay.
And if you want a small one, Ruby Slippers is quite small. It only gets 3 to 5 feet both directions. I would really say 3 to 4 feet. And I have it at the end of my pathway in the back garden, and it does get quite a bit of sun. And it is just gorgeous. I put it on my Instagram this weekend.
Cool. This might be Ruby Slippers, because isn't that a proven winner's variety?
You know what? I don't remember. I'll be honest.
Okay. Well, we won't tell them we talked about it. And that way,
Yeah.
So I do want to talk about a shrub that changes to a glorious red color that is Euonymus alatus, the burning bush.
Ugh.
And that is as invasive as I'll get out. It's invasive in Indiana. They are still allowed to sell it, because I checked the information online. But in the Northeast, most of those states, you cannot buy this for good reason, because it has just escaped cultivation and is tearing up through the woods.
It's a nightmare. It's a nightmare the same way Bradford pears and Callery pears are here. And also...
Asian honeysuckle is a nightmare here.
Oh my gosh, Asian honeysuckle is a nightmare here too, especially up by Tulsa. It's just terrible.
Here's the thing. Asian honeysuckle, it has no fall color.
And it's ugly.
Right now, when the leaves have dropped from the trees and you look at the woodlots around town, you see this green understory. That's all Asian honeysuckle. When I tell people that, they're like, oh my gosh, that is horrible.
And also autumn clematis. I know people love autumn clematis, but I can spot it in my back garden because we had that freeze, and now I can see it because it looks just as fresh and green as it did when it sprouted this spring. So I'm going to go and dig some of it out. Oh, we digressed off of shrubs. Anyway.
You went into vines suddenly. Let's call it. Yeah, we're out of control here. We're out of control here, Dee.
Okay, so anyway, no burning bushes. No burning bushes. No, none of that. No Callery pears. Okay, shall we go on to the next quote before we get too stressed?
I'm not stressed, but yes, we should do a quote.
I got to find it because my whole thing just decided to jump. Here it is. Anyone can cut an apple open and count the number of seeds, but who can look at a single seed and count the trees and apples? That's by Dottie Walters, and I have no idea what she's talking about really, but I like it.
Well, what she's saying, Dee, if I could interpret it for you, is the literalist can open the apple and count seeds.
Right.
The imaginative person can look at the seed and imagine all the future trees and apples that might come from it.
Oh, and I thought it was a metaphor for something else. But there we go. Our vegetable this week, we are not going to talk about very long because we didn't write much about it, but we decided to talk about onions again. And that you can grow, if you can find them this time of year, you can grow onions from sets. But if you want to grow unusual varieties, you need to start them from seed. And you can start seeds indoors. And depending on your climate, you need to look on the back of the onion packages because it just depends on your climate and whether you're going to grow them in cold frames or what you're going to do. But last year, I've done it 2 different ways in the spring. I've never planted onion seedlings in the fall, but you so could. I will say this, my fall garden, just in general, was eaten to the nubbins by every caterpillar known to man. Partly because I encourage caterpillars. I mean, everything was eaten. So,
welcome to the club.
Yeah, that was crazy. It was crazy how fast they got eaten and how I got nothing. All right, so onions. They don't eat onions, thank God, and they don't eat garlic, which my garlic is up. But the way I did it last spring is I started them indoors in about January.
Yes,
under lights.
They take a bit more time to start than, say, a tomato seedling.
I think you could even start, and you plant them early too. So I think you could even start them end of December if you've got time. But you probably won't because, Christmas. So I started mine at the beginning of January, under lights, indoors, and I waited until they were, they were pretty thin. And then at the end of February is when I planted them outside.
Forward a month.
And you do them at the end of March?
Yes.
Okay. So I had the best onions I've ever grown in my life. And you can grow, okay, so then the year before, I didn't get my onions started. And so I just planted the seeds directly in the soil in February. And guess what? I had green onions in late summer, which was kind of fun too, right? Because
that is fun. Yeah.
you never have enough green onions. So it worked out either way. So onions are very forgiving, and they're like garlic and potatoes. And if you want to order them and branch out, you should do that. And so I wanted to talk about one onion that I grew that I loved, and then I'm going to let you talk about bunching versus bulbing onions. Okay?
Got it.
Okay. All right. So I grew Italian onions. I grew something called monastrell, and it produced 3.5 to 4 inch, slightly flattened, purple, beautiful onions. They call them red, but whatever, red, purple. And I also grew a type called Apache, and Apache was another purple onion, but it was not flat like the Italian ones. Both were great, and I got the best onion harvest I ever had in my life. And I only grow like purple onions because, well, I can get really good yellow onions locally. It's not like something I need to grow. So now your turn. Or whatever you want to talk about.
Well, I wanted to talk about bulbing versus bunching onions, and there is a difference. And so, the bunching onions don't form the big. They don't form a bulb, and the bulbing onions, they form a bulb. So when I was ordering seeds last week, I did order seeds for a bunching onion called Tokyo Long, because what I tend to do is buy the onion sets and plant them real tight, and then thin them and use the thinnings as green onions. And I thought, I'm going to grow actual bunching onions from seed. So those seeds are arriving. And they had another one. It's like right after you place your order, I thought, I should have spent the money. Italian Red of Florence, which is sort of almost looks like a scallion, but it's another bunching onion. So
I've grown scallions, and you know what I did? They were very successful. I grew them year before last, and I had a ton of scallions, and it was easy. And then, what else did we want to talk? Oh, you have an article about bulbing versus bunching onions in Family Handyman, which we'll link to.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then we also wanted to talk about terroir again. So onions also have terroir.
They do.
Which, of course they do. Vidalia onions aren't just a sweet onion. They're from Vidalia, Georgia, and were developed there and grown there. And then there's another onion that's called Texas Sweet 1015, which we get more in Oklahoma. I do get Vidalia too, but you get Texas Sweet 1015 more often. I think Texas Sweet 1015 could come up with a better name, but it's got a whole history and it can be purchased, but it's grown in Texas. So both of those are sweet, extra sweet onions. And they don't keep as long as the ones that aren't extra sweet, but I love eating them in the summer. They're just one of my favorite things, especially in raw dishes.
Yes. Yeah. They're very good in raw dishes where you want to, and there are people that can actually, and this is a segue to our next topic, that actually like to eat onions like an apple and just bite into them.
Right. And there's a whole group of people that do that. I'm not one of them.
I am not one of them either.
I love onions, and I use them all the time. I used a ton of them last weekend because I made green chili pork stew, and then I made this beautiful pork puttanesca from the same giant piece of pork. So, and then I gave a bunch of it to my kids, so I didn't have to freeze it all. There was something else I wanted to say too. Oh, I wanted to ask you a question, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, and I'm really not trying to stump you. So Egyptian walking onions, are those bunching onions?
I don't know.
I think they are.
I don't
know either. But somebody's going to ask it. Somebody's going to come on and go, look, I did the research and they're actually this. I know someone
and
is
we're like,
we didn't. That's fine.
We didn't look it up.
We didn't this time.
We didn't.
No. So you want to do the next quote?
I do. It is likely I will die next to a pile of things I was meaning to read. Lemony Snicket.
That is so both of us.
So the book this week is Orchard by James Rich, and you got this as a review copy. I did not. And then I reminded you that he wrote another book called Apple,
which I own. And I had forgotten I owned, and I spent 2 hours searching for it on my bookshelves because it wasn't in the normal place. And I didn't think I was ever going to find it. And then I finally found it in the bookshelf next to the fireplace. It should have been on the bookshelf in the kitchen. Yeah, I go with that many bookshelves. Okay, so Orchard was sent to me by his publisher, and I love Orchard and I love Apple. And I sat down and read them both cover to cover that day. And I think Orchard is the best of the two, although I like Apple just fine. It incorporates more fruit ingredients in everything. They're both set up in the same format, from starters to main dishes to desserts to drinks. Okay, that's how it goes. He's from England, and he is I want to say a third generation Apple guy. He doesn't run the orchard, but he worked in orchards when he was a kid. I want to say he lives in Suffolk, but please don't get mad at me if I got that wrong because I didn't write it in my notes. Anyway, he works in an area and lives in an area, and I'm not sure it's Suffolk, that has, it's known for its apple orchards, which England kind of is anyway.
Right.
They're very famous for the Bramley apple. But he and his husband, they live in a house that has an orchard and a kitchen garden. And I thought it was really fun to read Orchard because he talked about all the different things he makes from his garden, both his orchard and his garden. Lots and lots of good recipes. He said it was comfort food because he wrote it during the pandemic, which I'm all about comfort food. I had to laugh, though, at one section. It was the section on all-American apple pie.
What's so funny about all American apple pie, Dee?
So in Apple, he decided that he couldn't write a book on apples without talking about the all American apple pie. And then he came to America, and he started interviewing people everywhere and eating all different kinds of apple pie. And he said no one would give him their recipes. And I was like, well, of course they wouldn't.
No.
Because they didn't want you to go publish it in your book, which made me laugh for one thing. But then he came home, and this is what his all-American apple pie has in it. He put hazelnuts in the crust.
That ain't right.
Which nobody would ever put that in a regular apple pie. Although I'm sure it's very nice. I'm sure it's very good. But then I started laughing because he said it can be served with custard. So then I told this to my daughter, Claire, and I was laughing, and she goes, well, why wouldn't it work good with Freddie's frozen custard or Archie's frozen? I said, no, he's talking about actual custard, Claire, not ice cream that's custard. And she goes, oh. And I said, he's talking about just pudding. It could be served with pudding. And she goes, oh.
No one's serving our apple pie with pudding.
No, it would take away from the apple pie. So anyway, I will say this. He said that we take our apple pie very, very seriously. And I said, yeah, apple pie is my favorite fruit dessert. My husband's is sour cherry, but I love apple pie. And I made a really good apple galette. And anyway, I thought the book was great. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the differences between England and America.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So in England, they use different measures than we do for their recipes. Did he translate those into American measurements?
Yes.
Okay.
He did. There's still a couple of things that aren't quite the same. And he tried to explain those, but he really did it in Orchard. He did a better job. I mean, he'd never written a book before when he wrote Apple. They're both beautiful books. They would be great presents for people who like to cook for Christmas.
Really? Okay. You want to know what my favorite fruit dessert is?
Yeah.
Blackberry pie.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. We eat it as cobbler here. And yes, it's good, and it does taste like summertime. But I don't like all the seeds. But I do love giant blackberries, and they do make a good pie or cobbler.
They do. And then I like apple cobbler with lots of cinnamon.
Well, see, my apple pie has lots of cinnamon, so you'd be very happy.
I would be very happy.
What about peach? I love peach in the summer.
I mean, I like plain peaches, but I don't necessarily think they need to be cooked into a dessert. I would rather just eat peaches.
Oh, my goodness. Peach cobbler is one of my favorite things. So that's for all of our listeners. Write and tell us what your favorite fruit dessert is. I would love to hear it. And do you serve it with custard, not the frozen kind?
All right. Do the next quote, Dee.
Autumn is the mellower season, and what we lose in flowers, we more than gain in fruits. That's by Samuel Butler, who we just really like because we use him a lot.
We kind of got a fruit theme going now.
We do. The whole entire thing is about fruit.
So the dirt.
So you start the first dirt, and then I'm going to get this other dirt that I found.
So the first dirt you actually sent this to me, and it's an article in the New York Times called "How About Them Apples? Research Orchards Chart a Fruit's Future." And it's really about preserving the genetic diversity in apples. And they have this fascinating interview and discussion about this orchard that a guy started up in Nova Scotia in 2011. And I think they said they have 400 apples, and it's the Apple Biodiversity Collection. And so that's not so much like there's 400 different apples that you could eat, but it's 400 different genetic types. And so,
right. And they're actually using some of these genetic types that he has, and they're mixing them with other to create new apples that can handle the heat better, because apple trees don't really like heat, and also that are much more disease resistant, because as our summers have gotten hotter, we have more trouble with disease and insects. And so they're working on this, and I appreciate them working on it. And they've also come up with some great apples because of some of the mixes in these orchards, which I thought that was really cool.
That is cool. And it's interesting that the guy in charge of it, Sean Miles is his name, is actually allergic to raw apples. He can only eat them cooked. Makes his mouth itch to eat a raw apple.
Yeah, that has to do with pollen too. Sometimes with pollinated fruits, they make your mouth itch. Nuts are an issue too. Okay, so is that enough about that?
Well, I wanted to say the other thing is when I went to Purdue, my first horticulture professor was big into apple breeding at the Purdue apple orchards. And he told us, and I've never forgotten this, that any apple that starts with PRI, like the Prima apples, are a result of breeding done at Rutgers, Purdue, and University of Illinois. So remember that.
That's cool.
Next time you get one of those
That's really
PRI
cool.
apples. Now,
I've never had a PRI apple in Oklahoma.
Well,
so
we don't.
There you go.
We don't allow people like you to eat our apples. They're yeah, just kidding. Well, you also found some other dirt.
Yeah, I found this morning, and I just wanted to share it because, it's timely. Travel Oklahoma has come out with a fall foliage and festivals list where you can go and see fall foliage. And the good news is I also follow something called Oklahoma something Conservation Federation. I don't know. Anyway, they wrote a whole thing. I should go and look that up because somebody's going to say, boy, that isn't good, D. Nash. It's the Oklahoma Conservation Corps, I think. And they did a whole article, which was fascinating because we know that fall foliage happens because of having a freeze. And then the tree pulls in all the chlorophyll. And when it pulls in the chlorophyll, it leaves the beautiful colors, right?
That's right.
Rains also trigger that. And we had some really good rains that started kind of in the south and went up north. We've had it happen twice. In fact, we got rain this week too. And they said that has caused a fall foliage burst in the southeastern part of the state. And I actually, after I sent this to you this morning, I also sent it to Bill and said, can you peel away tomorrow or the next day? And can we go somewhere? And he said, sure, if you'll plan it, we'll do it. So we're going to go look at fall foliage this
That
week.
sounds really nice. And I would say the same in Indiana, that you have to have a couple of good cold days and then some rain. Yep. And the next thing you know, the skies are blue and the trees are all coloring. A lot of our trees have started to drop leaves. But for our listeners, let me just clarify. It is the Conservation Coalition of Oklahoma.
I'm so bad. I follow them actually on Instagram, and I just saw it on Instagram and copied it really quickly this morning. So, and we should also point out, because nobody knows the behind the scenes stuff, about halfway through recording this the first time this morning, my internet decided to go out, and I'm actually working on a hotspot in my house with my phone. So, God help us. We're doing the best we can.
So next week you can give us a full report of the foliage that you've seen, and I'll keep my eyes open for foliage and see what I see, and we'll compare notes.
And I want everybody to keep their eyes open for foliage. This is a very short amount of time.
Yes, it is. It is. All right, so I'm going to give us a quote and send us down our rabbit holes. You got to know when to be lazy. Done correctly, it's an art form. Nicholas Sparks, who is far from lazy. Think about all the books he's published.
Oh my gosh, he's so busy.
So I think people like Nicholas Sparks that write all those books and stuff, they probably make a plan. Today I will be lazy. This afternoon I will be lazy. The next 10 minutes are my lazy minutes of the day.
Probably. They're very, very, yeah. So tell us your rabbit hole.
Well, keep going with yours because you're on a roll here. You're on a roll.
Okay. All right. After I read Apple, mine's all about apples. God help me, because I love apples and I eat an apple almost every day. So after I read Orchard and Apple, I began going down the UK apple rabbit hole. And my goodness, the apple is very important to the Brits, as is the damson plum. And I said, I guess it was also really important to early Americans too because of hard cider. Most of our early apples were hard cider apples because we had really dirty water and they didn't want people to die of bad things. So they drank hard cider, which is actually really good, but so is soft cider. So traditional orchards were grazed and had hedgerows, just like they did in the United States. And over time, they did intensive farming, and so they've lost a bunch of their orchards, their traditional orchards. Yep. And then that reminded me of an episode from Gardener's World, and it was this year, and it was episode 28, and it was about Tim Andrews, and he made it his mission to save local apple orchards. He would see windfall, and so he wanted to make some cider. And he ended up saying, I will help you, because these farmers are old now and they can't do all the work. And so he said, I will help you redo your orchards and keep them up. And I can't remember did I say how many it was? He manages 5 or 6 orchards and keeps them going now. And it's made the farmers, it's given them hope. And also his area lost 75% of their traditional orchards due to intensive farming. And they are also very famous. I think he lives in Gloucester. Yeah, North Nibley. I have to laugh because people are like, is this place even real? Because England has all these cute little names. Anyway, they are also very famous for their Perry, Perry, pears. And they're a heritage plant from the 1800s, and they make pear cider from those and eat them. And then I also looked up something else because I remembered something way back on Gardener's World, and this was about Wade Muggleton. And he is a heritage apple enthusiast and gardener. And so if you go and watch this episode, which we are going to link to because you can't get it easily, even on BritBox, it would take you forever to find it. Oh, I think actually this is on the BBC's website, so I don't feel bad about sharing it anyway. Right. It's not like it's on something else. Anyway, you can go watch this, and it's really, really good. And he talks about how they do grafting, and that's how they used to do a lot of apples, and they still do. You just graft another section of apple on another tree and another tree. Anyway, his garden is charming and beautiful, and he shows how to do grafting, and he has 7 varieties on one tree, and then I wrote yum, because I think that would be great.
Yes, I learned how to graft apple trees in college, and, that was when you had to have a successful graft that took, so, luckily my graft
not
took.
the easiest thing.
No.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of skill.
We talked a little bit about your grafting knife the last time we did our podcast.
A very sharp knife.
So that was my rabbit hole. What about yours, Carol?
So my books from the Folio Society of London arrived this week. They are by Charles Van Sandwyck, and you can look up his books, but they are charming little books.
Oh my gosh.
Hand illustrated and handwritten, I would say. He writes the text as well. All about little fairies and bunnies and mice and different things in the garden. And these are gorgeous books. Each one comes in a sleeve, like a box sleeve that you pull off. And
right.
They're extremely charming. And one little one, the pages sort of accordion out, which makes it very cute for reading with little kids. But the one book is called, I'm going to look around at it. It's called Letters from Fairyland. And when you open up the book, there's little envelopes glued down to some of the pages, and there's like little letters inside that you can pull out.
Oh,
so I'll
cute.
show you the cover of that one. Isn't that cute?
Are you going to show these to your garden fairies? They are garden fairies, you know.
Yeah, they might. I might tell the garden fairies about them. They're gorgeous books.
I think you should.
These are the kind of books that you would sit down with a child and you would hold the books and let them look and read them. So that they don't, because they weren't cheap, but they're beautiful books. And I even at 63, I enjoy looking at stuff like that. So, and now, of course, too. I went and said, I wonder if they have anything else. And they have the complete set of Cecily Mary Barker's fairy books.
Oh, wow.
They have a complete set. I think there's 5 or 6 in a binder thing all together. Yeah. And I thought, do I deserve another prize for myself?
You've written enough Family Handyman
I think I deserve another
that
present.
You deserve a prize.
So
you do.
I think I might order one more. I might order that set. And then I'm done until something else piques my interest. That was my rabbit hole.
That's a good one. We were waiting for it to come, so it's exciting.
Exactly. It is.
And they have them in those little folios because that keeps you from pulling on the
Yes. Keeps them very nice.
And that way you don't tear it up.
And then I should mention there's another book, and I will talk about it when I get it. But I went out to my mailbox and pulled out an empty envelope that had been torn on the end. And this was a book from an author in Canada that I had ordered from her website. And I'm like, where's the book?
It was stolen.
It was stamped.
You showed me the envelope.
It was stamped, received empty, envelope damaged. And I'm
BS.
Like, whatever. Yeah. So I wrote her back, and she's sending me another book. So we'll talk about that when I get it.
Cool. So what are you doing in your garden this week?
So this week in my garden, it was too warm to plant bulbs. The soil's just not cool enough. So if it cools down...
It's not here either.
I might get some bulbs planted, possibly mow and mulch and pick up some leaves to put on the vegetable garden. It's time to start covering it. And it's actually going to be, after today, I think, into the low 70s and sunny the rest of the week. So I hope to spend a lot of time out there getting a lot of things done. How about you?
There you go. I'm going to clean out the cut flower beds this week. They're ready because, they were annuals, so they're done. And we have a beautiful weather forecast all week. People, get out there. You've got to get out there. I'm also going to do my last honeybee inspections and start narrowing the entry to their hives. It's been so warm that I've just let them. They're having a good time with the last of the asters, so I've just been letting them have a good time. But it's time to button things up. And then if I have time, I'm going to pull out the rest of the pepper plants and throw them away out of the containers. And I'm going to plant the paper whites for indoor flowers. It won't be Ziva. I've ordered some other ones. I think I ordered Imball, among others. They aren't as stinky. So anyway, that's all.
Well, in the spirit of buttoning things up, let's button up this episode. We want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
And if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review that helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? They don't even have to be gardeners. If they like to cook, we talk about that and a bunch of other stuff, or read. Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And please subscribe to our Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelist at Substack.com. It is free, and it's linked in our show notes.
And if you want to help support us, use the affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission, and it costs you nothing other than that you bought something.
And then you got something. It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.